evening, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jenny Ford. I serve as the Executive Director of the Moscow Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center. We have a few housekeeping items before we get started with our District 5 Candidate Forum. First of all, we are going to be hearing from Henry Ann Westberg, Latah County Clerk, Auditor, and Recorder about voting.
Hello everyone, I'm Henry Ann Westberg, your Latah County Clerk. We're in the process of preparing for early voting, and here in Latah County we would like to use the basement entrance of the courthouse off of 5th Street. I'd like to show you what this is going to look like. So as you approach the courthouse entry door, you'll be asked several questions about whether you have been in contact with anyone who's had COVID, if you have any symptoms to COVID, and we do ask that you wear a mask and use hand sanitizer. Once you're in the courthouse, in the hallway, you'll be met by a receptionist who will triage whether you're a registered voter, whether you need to register that day and vote, and from there we'll be able to process you down towards room 7B at the end of the hallway. So once you've made it down to room 7B, my staff will assist you with getting a ballot, voting it, and tabulating it. Right now, we're using this room to prepare for elections. So you see the DS200s and some of our voting materials are around, and we are sending out a lot of absentee ballots right now. That's really the preferred method for voting in Latah County. If you really want to early vote, please plan to have some extra time allowable. I don't think it's going to be a fast process, and there could be a line. So we'll do the best we can and try to keep everybody safe during this election year. I want to make sure you're aware of some important dates. You need to register to vote by October the 9th. After that, voter registration closes. I know that seems way ahead of Election Day, but that is the state statute. So if you know of anyone who isn't registered to vote yet, make sure they do that by October the 9th. Then you have until October 23rd to request your absentee ballot. These ballots are being mailed out as fast as we can. Thank you for your patience, and thank you very much for voting absentee. I want to also let you know that early voting will take place from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. Monday through Friday from October 13th to October 30th. We will also offer 2 Saturday early voting dates, and you'll use the same entrance and the same process on Saturday as you do during the middle of the week. We're going to do early voting on October 17th and 24th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So not all day, just a half a day. 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry Ann, very much. The candidates, our moderator, as well as our volunteers are here at the SCL Event Center. The Moscow Chamber of Commerce sincerely appreciates the support from Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. I have the privilege of introducing Dave Whitehead, who is Chief Executive Officer at Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, where he oversees the company's global operations, including research and development, quality, sales, engineering services, manufacturing, and business areas. He is responsible for translating the company's executive vision into effective corporate strategies that prioritize quality, innovative, service, profit, and growth, and in that order. He received his bachelor's in electrical engineering from Washington State University, a master's in electrical engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and an honorary doctorate of engineering from the University of Idaho. Go Vandals. With that, please welcome David to the lectern.
Thank you, Jenny, for the kind introduction, and go Vandals. And welcome candidates to SCL. And well, thank you, Moscow Chamber of Commerce, for partnering with SCL to host this event. We're really excited about it. For those of you who don't know us, SCL's mission statement is to make electric power safer, more reliable, and more economical. And we do that with about 5,300 folks around the world keeping the lights on every day. Closer to home, we have about 2,400 folks living on the Palouse, with 600 working out of our Lewiston facility, and about 800 folks living in District 5. Some of you may know we just bought 150 acres, the south end of Moscow. So we're going to extend our reach and our capabilities into your district, so we're very excited about that. We'd like to also thank all the work that the folks do in the Idaho legislature, that keep a free, flat, and open economy running in Idaho. And that was one of the reasons we really were interested in purchasing that 150 acres in Moscow. Ed Schweitzer, our founder and president, would have loved to have been here to make some in-person remarks. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it, but he did record something, and I'd like to share it with all of you.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Moscow Chamber of Commerce, Idaho 5th District Candidate Forum. I'm grateful to the Moscow Chamber of Commerce for having brought us together this evening. Thank you so very much. Our Chambers of Commerce honor, share, and protect our nation's deep-rooted spirit of free enterprise. In fact, the motto of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is the spirit of free enterprise. Our roots of free enterprise are deep in this country and grounded in our Declaration of Independence from Great Britain. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter it or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. How brilliant and unique the American experiment is, founded on the fundamental that we, the people, are born with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Only in our country does it all begin with we, the people. Government then follows from that. Government is here to help us secure our inalienable rights. Those rights are endowed in us by our Creator. These rights aren't things that are permitted by government. We're the horse, government is the cart. These days, we the people are eager to return civility and grace to politics. The presidential debate of 2 nights ago only seemed to fuel our hunger even more for grace and civility, for professionalism, for leadership, and for respect. Respect of each other, respect of our country. May we, the people, right here tonight, brought together by the Moscow Chamber of Commerce, be a shining light in the West, radiating political grace and civility to our entire nation. May I personally thank all of our candidates for running for office. May I also thank your families for supporting you. No matter your political party, we applaud your courage, your strength and perseverance, and your presence of mind for wanting to campaign and run for office in order to serve we the people. Thank you all for being here this evening in person and through the magic of technology.
Thank you, Dr. Schweitzer. Now I have the privilege of introducing our moderator, Paul Kimmell. He is the Public Area Regional Business and Public Affairs Manager with Avista, and he has served on the Moscow Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee for years. Please welcome Paul.
Thank you, Jenny, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all of those watching online. It's my privilege and opportunity to excuse me, help moderate this tonight, and we're going to keep it moving, fast-flowing, and hopefully have some great questions and interaction with our candidates. I'll introduce you just by name only to start with, and then we'll move into introductions, okay? And you all are familiar with the rules. I think you were afforded those rules earlier, but with us tonight, from my left, starting with Dulce Kersting-Lark, we have Renee Love, we have David Nelson, Carolyn Nilsson-Troy, and then Brandon Mitchell. Two of our candidates could not make it tonight, Dan Foreman and James Hartley. It's a challenging time to have a forum, and we have some safety guidelines, and thank you, Schweitzer, for being so clear and cautious with these safety guidelines. And I want to just read these to you really quickly, because it has a bearing on some of the questioning and how we're going to navigate through some of this. Here at the Schweitzer Event Center, we can't exceed 10 guests, so I think we're maxed out looking around the room, and no guests of any candidate are in this building. Face coverings are worn at all times, obviously you can see that. Social distancing, 6-foot separations, and I think you can see that as well. And then after the use of the microphones, we're disinfecting. So, Jenny, you forgot to disinfect, but that's okay. So we are streaming live on Facebook, and recording will be uploaded on the Moscow Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel afterwards. And I want to thank especially Mackenzie Lawrence. Mackenzie is also on our Government Affairs Committee. She will be my timekeeper as well. And Mackenzie works at U of I Extension and is a great support during these times, has helped me, our Inland Northwest Partners group as well, on facilitating some Zoom meetings. So thank you, Mackenzie, very much. The rules are we'll have a 2-minute opening for all of you, 90-second closing, a 2-minute answer, 30 seconds if there's rebuttal or clarification, and I always have the opportunity to follow up with a clarification, and that can be just for a second or 15 or something. So let's get started. And I wanted to share with you, because I shared those safety guidelines with you, and the Chamber did invite Dan Foreman as well as James Hartley, and I want to read their statements to you if I could. This is from Dan Foreman. He said, "Thank you for the invitation. I do appreciate it. However, I will not be attending because of the COVID restrictions. I understand the Chamber is not responsible for these restrictions, but enough is enough. It's time for people to disregard these unconstitutional restrictions of our freedoms. We are free people, and it's time we get started to remember that and act accordingly. The governors of Idaho and Washington have been overstepping their authority, and people are waking up to this. Thanks again for the invite." And from candidate Hartley, James Hartley, "Thanks for the invitation. Unfortunately, I cannot and will not wear a mask. Masks are proven ineffective and in fact are proven to be harmful to the well-being of persons that do not have any health issues. Long-term wearing of masks has been proven to cause skin and lung infections. The mental side effects of wearing masks, such as depression, are well known. In fact, the CDC has again reversed its position on the effectiveness of masks. Forcing healthy people to wear a medical device without approval of a physician is practicing medicine without a license and illegal. Discriminating against persons that due to religious or medical reasons will not wear a mask is also illegal. Hence, I will not support any forum that enforces policies that are both illegal and unsafe. I must respectfully decline to the unreasonable rules set forth by the forum." So, just wanted to put that into the record and make you aware of that. And one of our questions to start with will be about that, but let's move on to opening statements, and we will start with Dulce.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. And thank yous all around to the Chamber of Commerce for organizing this, to SEL for hosting us, to Amplify for being tech gurus in a way that I could never imagine to be Really thank you to all who are watching who want to become educated about the candidates and where we stand on issues. I have always had an interest in civic education. That's one of the reasons I am a proud member of the League of Women Voters and have been for many years, is I really believe you need to understand the folks who are representing you, their positions, and you need to understand what their role is. So Dulce Kersting-Lark is my name, and I'm running for the Idaho House of Representatives here in District 5 for Seat A. As the Journey song goes, I'm a small town girl, and I grew up in a Midwestern town and have lived in small towns my entire life. And really that is why the Palouse feels so much like home to me. I've lived here for about a decade and can't imagine living anywhere else. Idaho is truly spectacular. I decided to run for Idaho Citizen Legislature because, as I said, I have a deep interest in politics. I'm a historian by training, and that leads me to try to understand contemporary issues through a historic lens and really trying to figure out the roots of our the most pressing challenges that we face. I also work in the nonprofit sector, and so that has made me keenly aware of many of the challenges that my neighbors face, whether that's housing insecurity or their desire to protect their working agriculture lands. That has really given me a deep perspective. And finally, I'll say I'm running because I want to be a voice for young families. My husband and I both work full-time jobs. We have bills to pay, and we've got to budget correctly to make it at the end of the month. And we just welcomed a son into the world a couple of months ago, so I want to make sure that those perspectives are presented in the legislature.
Thank you, Dulce. Renee.
Hi, I'm Renee Love, and I grew up in rural poverty, just south of Cheney, Washington, just over the state line. And we didn't have much when I was a kid, and I helped my parents clear out slash piles and dig well and septic lines in order to get by. I know what it's like to be food insecure and to not have a guaranteed roof over my head. I didn't have health insurance until I was 18 years old when I finally went to college. So before that time, I had not seen a dentist or a doctor. And I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and then I went on to get my PhD in geology. And I understand how much an education can improve a person's life. After I graduated from the University of Idaho, I went and worked for ExxonMobil in Houston, Texas. And then when I came back home, when I came back to the area, I was appointed by Governor Butch Otter to the Idaho Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And this really showed me how civic engagement and how one person can make a difference in the state. I'm now an instructor at the University of Idaho, and I study ancient climate, and I really love to play a part in educating our students' future. I'm also a small business owner. Everything in my life has prepared me for this. I understand what people, especially rural people in Idaho, are going through. I was able to break the mold of my family and to be the first to go to college in my family. I also was able to have a successful career and now work as an educator and a small business owner. It's important to elect people in the legislature that know what we are going through and have varied backgrounds for understanding our citizens in the state. And I am the person that could bring these perspectives to represent you in Boise. Thank you for having this, thank you for having me, and I look forward to telling you about my platform.
Thank you, Renee. Dave.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks Schweitzer and the Chamber for hosting this tonight. It's unfortunately my only opportunity to be in a forum this year, since my opponent is also unwilling to be at the League Forum next week. So I've been your state senator for 2 years. I really enjoy doing that, and I feel like I have come to understand a fair bit on how state government works and how I can help you. My background, I grew up on a farm in Genesee and went to the University of Idaho in engineering. From there, I went to graduate school in the East, and I got my first job with Chevron Oil in the Bay Area. From that, I was able to spin off a software company that in the end became the leading provider of software for oil refineries for energy management. When my career in that ended, it was a great opportunity for me to run for Senate, and I was very happy to do that. In the Senate, I've kind of worked in three main areas. I've worked in healthcare. The year I was elected is the year we passed Medicaid expansion, and we have it fully implemented now. And most of the restrictions the legislature tried to put on it have not held up in court. Right now, there are 87,681 Idahoans covered by Medicaid expansion. And I think that's a key thing to be worried about in the next session if we are in a financial crisis. The other place I work a lot on is infrastructure issues. I was on the Senate Transportation Committee. I worked with Senator Burt Brackett from Twin Falls area to get a bill passed that provided funding for some of our rural bridges that are aging out. Again, I look forward to your questions tonight, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, David. Carolyn.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chamber, and thank you, Ed and Schweitzer Engineering for providing this forum. And I especially want to thank Schweitzer Engineering for investing more in Idaho. We're so honored to have you in Lewiston, and really look forward to seeing what you build out in Moscow with your property there. I'm a local girl. My folks are high school sweethearts from Genesee, Idaho. I was born in Lewiston. I lived in Lewiston until I was 9. And then my dad really bought into the vision that JFK had for a better world, and they joined the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps took families as a trial, 200 families. We went to Botswana, Africa. I was 9, my brothers were 6 and 7, and we were there till I was a sophomore in high school. Graduated from Orfino High School. I tell the St. Mary's folks one of the reasons I like St. Mary's so much is it reminds me of Orfino. They're both logging towns. I married a farmer and worked full-time on the farm for almost 10 years, and he and I still have our farm partnership. We had farm ground and then also registered cows. And then I started into nonprofit. I was a fundraiser for the University of Idaho for 12 years. And have a nonprofit consulting firm. I had to write this down because I've been on so many committees since I've been in the legislature. I've been 3 terms. I've been on health and welfare. I've been on agriculture the entire time. I've been on business. I've been revenue taxation, judiciary and rules, because I'm very interested in what's happening in our judicial system. And then I just was appointed on the JFAC committee, the first Republican from Latah County since 1996. So that's a real honor. And I look forward to answering any questions tonight. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Carolyn. Brandon.
My name is Brandon Mitchell. I'm running for the Idaho House seat 5, C-Day, or District 5 C-Day. I've told my story quite a bit to a lot of people that have asked me, and so I'm going to kind of sum things up a little bit and not go into too much detail because I don't have a whole lot of time for it. But I was born and raised in a small town in Utah, Syracuse, Utah. And while I was there, my parents divorced when I was real young. I grew up in a single parent home. Mom raised me. Luckily, I had grandma and grandpa that was close by that instilled good Christian values in me. After I graduated high school, I married my wife, and we started our family. We had a son, and after that, we started doing foster parenting. And I think it's real important. That's one of the attributes that I think I can bring to the house is understanding the foster care system. I went to school, went to Weber State University. I finished almost 2.5 years there, and then my business, the career that I chose, took off, and I started growing up through that. So I kind of stopped doing school, worked my way up in the company, and finally ended up buying my own stores. So I purchased a couple of stores here locally in Moscow. We've since grown to 6 locations throughout this area. And so I decided now that it's time for me to go back to school. So I've actually been attending BYU, Idaho. I'm almost done with that and almost have my degree there. My brother-in-law keeps asking me why I'm doing it, and it's just because it's something that's important to me to be able to do that. I look forward to serving this district. I want to build unity. I want to build civility and see if we can't continue to grow Idaho and make Idaho even greater than it is already. So I'm hoping that I can answer any questions for you tonight and give you some concise answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. And our first question tonight will be for all candidates, and Brandon, we'll start with you. This has to do with the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the response we have seen in the state of Idaho. The question is, in what feels like the blink of an eye, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world and life as we know it. From the loved ones we've lost and the strain on our hospitals and public health systems to social distancing measures that have closed schools and businesses, halted gatherings, and changed how workplaces operate, the pandemic's impacts are vast and unprecedented. As the impacts of COVID-19 continue to reach communities across the country and here in Idaho, significant shifts in federal, state, and local budgets are forcing policymakers to grapple with sharp reductions in revenue and the changing needs of the people they serve. Idaho's response to COVID-19 is now primarily local or regional in nature. The state of Idaho and the governor's office continues to monitor statewide COVID-19 activity and works closely with the 7 public health districts across the state to ensure the health and safety of Idahoans. This is a 2-part question. First, did Idaho respond appropriately with the governor's 4-stage Idaho Rebounds and the One Idaho initiative? And are those resources adequate to help support and protect our businesses? And are we as a state doing enough? And then the second part is, as a legislator, how might you address potential state budget revenue shortfalls, and what might that prioritization look like? So Brendan, we're going to start with you.
Okay, that's a
And I'm happy to repeat
question.
anything, okay? Sorry.
It's okay, it's a long question. Let me see if I can hit on this. As far as how the governor has handled this, I've said this several times, I am not sitting in his seat. I don't know the same information that he has. And so making a decision on that, I can't fault him for how his decision was. I can tell you as a business owner, we took a huge hit right at the very get-go, but things have been rebounding. What we've done for the rebound and getting back into the swing of things has really helped our business out, and we've actually, the last couple of months have had great months. And so I would say yes, I think that rebounding the way that we have has really helped out the businesses. I am deeply concerned about the divide that it's caused and the concern that so many people have on this subject and topic. I think that as a legislator, one of the things that I would like to do in Boise is to get better laws on how to handle an emergency, because a pandemic is totally different than an act of war. It's totally different than a natural disaster. And so having some guidance and direction would be a lot better for us. So I guess that that would probably be one of the biggest things, and working on unity, because right now we're divided because of this pandemic, and it kind of concerns me that we're so divided.
So let me ask you the second part there. So as a legislator with potential state budget shortfalls, how would you address that? How would you prioritize?
So, and that's kind of interesting, because as a business owner, I've had to make payroll. I've had to make choices and decisions and prioritize things. And I think the biggest thing you got to look at is what the biggest value is. When you look at what a lot of the schools and stuff are doing, like the University of Idaho and WSU and all the research that they're doing on different things, you gotta really focus on the research and keep that moving. But also you need to find ways to actually help the businesses out without overspending at the government level.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn.
Well, I think that's the longest question in the history of forums.
Hey.
Well, of course, I think any opportunity to wear Vandal gear is a good opportunity, and so I wore my Vandal mask tonight. I do think that this was unprecedented, and that the information coming out changed so rapidly. I've told people, I'm not willing to be an armchair quarterback. I think our governor did a fantastic job. I think some of the some of the glitches that maybe happen are just an example of how Idaho runs really lean, And he has a great team working for him, fantastic group of people, and they were stretched very thin, and I really appreciate all the extra hours that they put in. I do think that this is also unprecedented in that our laws don't cover what to do for an ongoing crisis. Our laws are set up for something that's really happens quickly and gets over quickly, an ice storm like we've had in the past, flooding like we've had in the past. And so I think they've done really well creating a playbook for this particular thing. As far as the budget shortfalls go, I don't believe that Idaho's going to have a shortfall for the next fiscal year. I think we're going to be actually ahead. And I think we're going to have a lot of one-time money. I'd like to see that go into schools. Actually, I'd like to see that go into school facilities, and I've spoken to several members of the governor's team about that. Finding a way to do a challenge match to communities that have aging infrastructure in their K through 12 schools. Our budget is, a lot of it is based on user fees, and so those general ed money that is general fund money that would go into programs, I hope go into education, because I think that's the key to everything.
Thank you, Carolyn. David.
Thank you, Paul. So the COVID pandemic has really been so unprecedented in Idaho. And I have seen really firsthand how people are suffering in the state. Early on, I got an awful lot of calls from people on unemployment, and our unemployment computer infrastructure hadn't really been invested in well either by the federal or the state government. And so folks suffered for many, many weeks to get their unemployment benefits. And now we have kids suffering in virtual school in some places or in hybrid schools, and they're just not good learning environments. And I really feel for those folks, and I feel like we have to do the most we can to support both our kids in school, our businesses as we proceed through this. Now, I was appointed by the governor to his governor's economic recovery task force early on, and so was able to help come up with ideas on how we could help business early on. And that resulted in some of the business economic grants, the small business and the self-employed grants, and many other things that helped us through the early on. I would agree that Governor Little has done quite well at managing this. I probably would have appreciated a little bit more centralized management of the health and safety issues. But overall, I approve of what he's done. As far as the revenue shortfalls, I tend to agree with Representative Troy that the revenue coming into the state looks good at this point, although many of the stimulus programs from the federal government are over now, and so I do worry about that other foot to drop. One thing I think that's a particular focus that we need to work on is the University of Idaho. It's had many years of budget cuts, and we need to find a way to use some revenue or from the rainy day funds of the state to help the U of I.
Thank you, David. Renee.
Yeah, so I think the governor did a good job. I mean, he halted some of the stages of reopening based on the numbers, and we weren't meeting those numbers. And I think it's a hard balance. You're balancing between people's safety and the economy. And we want to make sure our economy is good. We want to make sure that people are safe and healthy. And that is a hard thing to call. There's a lot of different numbers and decision-making tactics that went into that. As far as budget cuts or how do we address new shortfalls, I think we absolutely, I'm going to reiterate what the past two have said, that we absolutely need to fund education. And we cannot take any more from our schools. I think I mentioned before, I did mention before in my opening, that I'm an instructor at University of Idaho. I was an alum. I went there for graduate school. And I saw firsthand several in my department lose their jobs because some of the budget cuts. And I think that it's hard because our department's being combined, and we also see that there's other jobs being cut around the university. So they cannot be hit hard again. I think we also need to really advocate for mental and behavioral health in the state. We just got them set up in the state, and we have to continue doing that. We need to make sure that our rural hospitals are funded, and we keep going with our telehealth services, especially during COVID. I think that it's going to be very important to just really continue making sure that our rural communities especially can make ends meet, and especially with the economy, especially with small businesses. Our small business was hit hard during COVID, and we were lucky not to have a storefront. And so I really resonate with people that do have small businesses and people that were hit hard with the economy changes.
Thank you, Renee. Dulce.
I have to say that I really appreciate Governor Little's response to what truly is unprecedented. A lot of people will make comparisons to the 1918 flu pandemic, but this is really an entirely different situation. We live in such a globalized world now that things progress so quickly day to day. The situation was changing, and as Mr. Mitchell said, I don't know what the governor, what information he had, but I can tell you when he decided to shut us down on March 25th to bring everything to a halt and tell people to stay home, it made me take it more seriously, and I thank him for that ability to keep my family safe. So I really do appreciate that, and I appreciate that he is leaning into local control and letting regions of Idaho determine what risk level they have. So in that sense, I think it has been handled as well as it could have been. I do believe that we need to be setting better parameters for what is likely to happen in the future. I don't think this is the last global pandemic we will see as the rate of business and global travel happens. I think we're going to see this again and sooner than 100 years. What I would do when I get to the legislature, I've given a lot of thought to this. You know, I was door knocking the other night, and I spoke with a gentleman who is not of the party that I am of, and he said, you know, if there's a rainy day fund, isn't it raining outside? We need to use our rainy day fund, and I think there are creative ways that we could utilize it without spending it down too much. Perhaps we could create a fund where businesses could apply for no interest loans to help them get through the final hump of this pandemic. And I also really think we need to take seriously the idea that broadband is a utility and a necessity for everybody. I think doing remote school has proven that you need access to broadband internet.
Thank you. Thanks for all those thoughtful responses. This next question is for our two incumbents, Representative Troy and Senator Nelson, and I will start with you, Senator Nelson. This has to do with the special session. A few months ago, Governor Little called a special session to consider things like election laws as well as establishing temporary civil liability standards related to the pandemic. In your opinion, did the special session accomplish its intended purposes?
Well, I think we didn't accomplish a lot at the special session. The things that we were trying to do were fairly small. The one I appreciate the most is the election law correction, which basically allows our clerks to have 7 days to open up and start processing absentee ballots. The law before that only gave them 24 hours to do that. So with so many more absentee ballots, that's important to have. And so I think that was worth doing. The liability bill, which provided liability to basically almost everybody except for state government and the federal government. If someone caught COVID in your establishment or your home or because of you, some additional immunity from liability protection. I voted against that because I thought that sent the wrong signal. We were having schools at that time open up live in counties that were really in the high-risk category as far as those cases. And so I thought we needed to not loosen up liability at that point. I also think that had a very minor effect, would have a very minor effect. I don't know how anybody's going to prove they caught COVID at any particular place in time, so how that helps, I don't quite get.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Thank you. A great question. And I have a very different perspective than the senator because my husband owns an insurance agency, both in Moscow and in Lewiston, and this issue's been keeping him up at night. The issue is in Idaho, most of the commercial policies are written with a $100,000 limit. And so if you are an employee of a company and you get COVID, you're covered by workman's comp. But if you're not an employee or you're a family member, you could sue that business for the full limit of that $100,000 plus beyond that. And so a lot of our businesses, our small businesses in Idaho in particular, were at risk of losing not only their business but perhaps their homes and their other assets. This piece of legislation was strongly supported by the Idaho Chambers of Commerce, the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. I heard from many school boards. I heard from the University of Idaho that they wanted it, from food producers of Idaho, many more. It was a hot topic. It does not protect those who have reckless or willful misconduct. And we sunsetted it so that we'll be able to take a look at it again in July of next year and see how it's working and if it's working well. And if you go online and look at the number of lawsuits that are underway already over a virus that is not the fault of our small businesses, you will see how come this was such a critical piece of legislation in order to reopen our state. It was probably the most important thing that we've done this year. And so I proudly voted for that. And I guess I also heard from our schools. I went and visited a lot of the schools in my district, and they have really good plans. And I think they're equally concerned about the health and safety of their students and their faculty and their staff. So I think it's a great piece of legislation.
Carolyn, we had a question come in, partly based on your earlier response to question 1. And it's a follow-up to your comments. Can you explain your role on the emergency declaration from the special session that can be seen as contrary to your earlier statement? Does that make sense?
No.
Earlier, vote. Role. Explain your role. Okay. Okay. All right, we're going to pass on that one. Never mind. Thank you anyway.
It might be what my vote was on the House concurrent resolution.
That's it. You got a thumbs up from
Yes,
Haley.
and the Senate did not take that up, so it was laid on the table. The Senate also had the benefit of an Attorney General's opinion after we had our debate, and an opinion from some outside attorneys. I voted in favor of that, and we had a very healthy debate. If you're interested, I would watch the debate online. I do feel that it is outside of the governor's purview to budget $1.25 billion without any legislative oversight. I thought the legislature should have been called into session for the budget alone. That's a lot of money to spend, and that's the job of the legislature.
Thank you, and sorry for that confusion.
I know,
All
but
right.
I'm glad I could clear it up.
You got it, you caught it, okay. This next question is for Brandon, you alone. This question says, your campaign sign says, freedom counts. What freedoms are you referring to, and are you inferring we are currently living without freedom?
So I'm not inferring that we're living without freedom, but what my worry is that if we start losing those freedoms, one of the things that really got me into politics was years ago when you started seeing where kids couldn't take their Bibles to school. We have a freedom of religion, and that shouldn't be stopped. So that's kind of what got me going into it. And then I started recognizing different steps that were coming that were starting to take freedoms away. And it started with just that minor thing that if we go too far, then we all of a sudden start losing those freedoms. We love the freedoms that we have here, and especially here in Idaho. I would save myself a ton of money if I lived in Washington State, but I love living in Idaho. And so we pay that extra in taxes because of that. But I want to keep those freedoms intact because I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to enjoy the same freedoms that we enjoy today.
Great, thank you very much. This next question is for all candidates, and it has to do with environment and climate change. And we'll start with you, Dulce. How do you believe climate change is affecting us in north central Idaho? And what is the role of the Idaho legislature in addressing climate change and its effects on us?
Well, thanks so much for that question, Paul. And it's certainly a topic that is weighing heavier on my mind than ever before. As I said, we just welcomed our first child into the world, and I really do have some pretty serious concerns about the world that that he will be inheriting in the coming decades. I think the first step, the first thing that the legislature needs to recognize is that hiding from climate change, denying that climate change is happening, will not make it go away. And I truly believe that we need to be employing the smartest scientists that we have right here in Idaho. The University of Idaho is full of really intelligent folks studying this issue, and they can point to a variety of ways that North Idaho is changing. I think in particular we see it in our forests. It's becoming a wetter climate, and so there's more undergrowth, and we end up with more super fires. I think that the legislature also needs to come alongside industry. We can't do it alone. This really is going to have to be a partnership between public and private institutions. I think we should applaud organizations like Avista and Idaho Power that are moving towards 100% renewable energy by 2040. And we need to find ways to further encourage that move towards renewable energy. And I think that the state should buy in where it can to do the things that average Idahoans, everyday Idahoans are already doing. If we're purchasing state vehicles, we need to make sure that they're fuel efficient vehicles. If we're paving new roads, let's think about putting bike lanes in. I think there are so many levels at which we can address climate change, but first we have to honestly go toe-to-toe with this reality and recognize that this is something we have to deal with.
Thank you, Dulce. Renee?
So it turns out that I'm a climate scientist. So I study climate science, specifically how plant fossils through time actually respond to changing climate. And I'm one of those people at the university that study it. And, you know, climate change is not a scientific debate, it's a political debate. And that's unfortunate because I think the reason why we really need to make sure that we pay attention to it is because we need to make sure that our agricultural systems and our forest economies can rebound and can keep up with the changing climate. Frankly, agriculture is the lifeblood of our pollutes. And as the climate changes, we might get different pests, moisture regimes, and temperature, and that's going to be hard on our economy unless we don't be proactive and make sure we have solutions. In addition, our forest economies, again, can be hurt by different snowpack levels. We can well, right now we see a lot of wildfires happening in the area. I don't want to see an increased amount of wildfires. And so there's a lot of things that our legislature can do to remain proactive in the face of climate change. We could look at what can we grow in the area. And that goes for maybe different crops, that goes for different trees for our forest economies. But we need to make sure that we are looking at model projections to see if we can get ahead of this. I share an office wall with actually one of the people that responded to the Heartland Institute talking to the legislature last year about climate change. And University of Idaho is at the forefront of looking at what's happening in this area in terms of climate modeling and what will happen to our forest and agricultural systems.
Renee, just a quick follow-up. Is this a discussion you have with the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission? Is it something you've talked about?
No, not on that commission. So yeah, I was on the Idaho Oil and Gas Conservation Commission for the state. Climate change was not one of the things that we talked about. We talked about other things such as water use and land use issues, as well as private land concerns and things like that instead.
Okay, thank you. David?
you, Paul. Well, I agree. In the legislature, we need to be at a place where we can talk about climate change and have the conversations on where we can help. I would applaud Governor Little for opening the door to us 2 years ago. He at least brought it up and was not shouted down. But then really the only thing I've seen in the legislature has been the Heartland Institute coming, and they were basically climate deniers. So we need to move that conversation forward. And maybe that takes some different people in the legislature. The kind of things I'm concerned about that we need to work on are helping ag and business and our citizens of the state. In southern Idaho, it's irrigated agriculture is really dependent on water storage. And much of their water storage is from snowpack. Well, if we're in a warmer climate and the snowpack comes off early, or they lose a lot of water. And that comes down through our area too, because that water comes down through the Snake River system and down through the dams, which affect the salmon as well. So I think we need to be looking at good research, looking at practical projects to help ag, to help businesses where they're impacted, and to do the things to make sure we control fire and we keep all of our industries like lumber and farming viable as we go forward.
Senator, are people asking you about this on the campaign trail as you knock on doors?
I do get a few questions on it. Last night especially, there was 2 people who were that was their number one concern when I went through.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's as much as education,
Sure.
but climate change does come up, and there is definitely a concern there.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn.
Thanks. This is a great question, and I'm so proud of the work that the University of Idaho and WSU are doing in conjunction with each other. They have been actually on the forefront of this issue for a number of years now. They received some very big grant funding to look at climate change and crop systems. And the beautiful thing is, between the research and extension centers that the U of I has and that WSU has, that we're really covering a lot of the Pacific Northwest. We also have a lot of research agreements between the U of I, WSU, and Oregon State. So that partnership is really important. To me, that means that we need to make sure that we keep the ag research and extension budget strong. We need to, I really think we need to invest more money in the Parma RENEE Center. I'm a huge fan of extension. That's how we get the word out. And so I think those are really important. We've made a huge commitment to the Good Neighbor Authority. That's obviously a federal program, but it impacts local communities, and they have some say in how the timberland around them is managed. And I was just coming back from Boise yesterday, and I saw several signs: graze it, log it, or watch it burn. And I think as the climate changes, we're going to see more and more of these super fires. I think it's really important. The way these lands were managed in the past really took that as an important way to manage it. And we have a choice now, and I think that that's a choice that we need to continue to make. And my mom tells stories of they would move their cattle from the ranch down at Lewiston up to Three Bear out behind Deary, and those cows grazed all the way up and all the way back, and those sorts of things aren't happening anymore. I think we really need to look at what was successful in the past.
Thank you. And then Brandon.
So a couple of things. First off, I'd like to echo what Representative Troy said about the schools here and how much work they're doing. I think that's important to recognize. I also would like to thank Ms. Love. She's got a perspective that a lot of us may not have. But one of the things that I've really looked at is our Earth has always had climate changing. It's always been changing. And I'm not a climate denier, but you've got scientists on this side that are saying it's not caused by us. You've got scientists on this side that are saying it is caused by us. And somewhere there's a little bit of truth in both of those. And so I think as a representative, our responsibility is to take those two and put them together and say, okay, what's the best solution? So as far as coming up with an exact solution tonight, it's kind of difficult to do, but looking at the data and getting information on both sides and being able to work together and be unified, I think we'll be able to find different answers. I agree that forest management is going to be an important role. I think that we've missed the boat on that in a lot of different aspects, and I think that's why we're having so many fires and how bad they've gotten. So I think that that's important to recognize. So I think that management of that is going to be important, as well as our farmlands, like it's already been mentioned here.
Thank you,
Can I
Brandon.
mention one more thing?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
The Idaho Department of Lands has been actually very proactive about managing our forest lands. They've done a fantastic job on Idaho lands. We have now invested in 8 new positions for the Idaho Department of Lands in order to leverage the Good Neighbor Authority and look at those plans around these rural communities that are surrounded by forests in order to help reduce the fire risk. And I really would like to give a shout out to the Idaho Department of Lands for the great work they're doing.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else have any follow-up? Okay, thank you. And Brandon, we'll stay on you for this next question. My company, Avista, is a member of the Idaho Business for Education Close the Digital Divide Program initiative. They just finished phase 2 at the end of August, and although they are still collecting spare computers every week for students and lots of generous donations from the general public as well as IBE members. And really the goal is to help fill the computer and connectivity gaps that the Governor's Digital Divide Committee cannot fill. As you might be aware, Governor Little made nearly $200 million available to school districts during this pandemic to help close the divide through computers, internet service, professional development for teachers, and learning management systems. So this is kind of a long question, but bear with me. As a state, are we doing enough to ensure all K-12 students, as well as higher ed teachers are being provided enough resources and businesses? With the recent infusion of CARES Act funding, the state recently awarded $48 million to address needs for distance learning, telehealth, public safety, and e-commerce. Keep the momentum moving for more funding and connectivity. Would you agree with that? And any other comments around closing this digital divide? Brendan.
So I think that one of the things, because I've been thinking a lot about this, and in order to keep our economy going strong, broadband is going to be important as well, and I think that bringing that out is going to be a huge thing. As we think about the students, this pandemic's really opened our eyes to a lot of the digital stuff. I've talked to a lot of different teachers and educators and whatnot, and one of the biggest things that I'm seeing is they want parents more involved and more active, being a participant in that. And I think that as we as parents start looking into it a lot closer, we would actually be able to help raise more money as well to put towards it on a parent level or on a citizen level here locally. I think that the money that's been put to it, I don't want to just throw money just to throw money, but if it's something that's going to benefit, such as this has, I think that we're good at sending money for the benefit of our students, because that's got to be our number one priority, is our students.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Well, my daughter Marie works for a company out of Chicago, and I've been getting to do a lot of babysitting because they're an accounting firm, and she reviews a lot of the tax returns that go back. She makes a great salary working out of Genesee, Idaho. So I think that's a wonderful example of how critical this is. It's going to be a long-term effort. Brandon and I went and visited up at St. Mary's, and they have a wonderful plan for reopening, and their superintendent said that they believe that less than 30% of the kids for the St. Mary's School District have access to internet at home. So they're putting everything on a thumb drive to send that home with the kids so that they can at least do their homework. You know, so what happens in Boise, what happens in Moscow, what happens in St. Mary's, they're very different. So we're going to have to be creative on how we do it. I think there's been a big effort in the Transportation Committee. I know Senator Crabtree and I have talked about this a lot, about how we should be burying cable every time we're digging up a road. We better be burying cable for internet. One of the big issues is the last mile. I serve on the Idaho Rural Partnership Board, and welcome, Paul. I'm glad that you're now on that board as well. But you know, that's an issue that we talk about, that last mile. How do you get it off of the interstate or off the highway into town and make it available in town? Utah's done a great job of that. I think we need to be creative on how we do it and make sure that we that we push for all areas of Idaho, not just the urban areas, to have great access to internet.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. So I moved back to Moscow in 1998 with an internet company. I mean, we had to be able to access customers all over the world, and I was able to do that in Moscow then, and it was a criteria for me to be able to come back. I just couldn't have done it if we didn't have the level of broadband then that we did. Now, we don't have that everywhere in the state. Towns like Moscow, Liston, most of the urban areas are good. But I learned last year when I served on the governor's the governor's broadband task force that central Idaho is a real gap area, and we need to find the ways to incentivize our providers to do more service out there at higher speeds. One of the particular problems is a lot of the service, if there is service there, it tends to be fairly slow. It's fixed Wi-Fi at 6 or 8 megabits, and really a useful internet connection, we need to be higher than 25 megabits per second download. The broadband grants that we use out of the COVID money, that $48 million that Paul mentioned, are a good step. I wish we would have got more of that in Latah and Benewah County. I felt like our county brothers north of us did quite a bit better on getting good grants put together in there. So I would continue to encourage more funding that we can use there, making our providers and our government officials really cognizant of where there are grant opportunities. And I think Idaho may need to be put together some sort of a funding package to pick up some of it as well.
Thank you, David. Renee?
Yeah, so I really applaud the efforts for trying to fill the gap, but there's so much more that we need to do. I think everyone here has already reiterated that our rural communities especially are having a hard time with educating with limited broadband. So we absolutely need to make sure that we have more broadband brought to the rural communities so our educators can succeed. And that's not just the teachers, but that's also the people that are being educated, the students. You're asking, are we doing enough for K through 12 or higher education? And I can't reiterate enough that we need to better fund our education system. And this would help the problem. Our education system is funded dead last in the nation, and we have a hard time with funding a lot of things in our education system. We rely on levies and bonds to fund our education system. And so if we could get out in the forefront of looking at what our teachers and our schools actually need, then we should be able to better prepare for certain gaps in the future. I think it's going to be really important, again, to making sure that our students are growing in a good way and that they're able to learn, especially with limited broadband, especially in the rural communities.
Thank you, Renee. Dulce?
So, Paul, you started your question by mentioning the device drive that the Idaho Businesses for Education has put together. And when I saw that, I was really excited to see that there was this initiative to make sure every kid has access to a tablet or a laptop to ensure that they can get their schooling done and that they're having an equitable educational experience. I was out door knocking in Genesee, and I happened to knock on the door of the principal, and he shared with me that they've had a one-to-one tablet to student ratio for a number of years. And so there are districts that have these things, and there are districts that haven't. And this goes back to a larger theme that I've talked with too many people to count about, and that is we have districts that have access to opportunity and we have districts that don't have access to that opportunity. And so I think it is incumbent upon the Idaho legislature to ensure that every student has an equal educational experience. It's in the Constitution that we have a uniform school system. And I think at this point, digital devices are part of that school system. We can't put that genie back in the bottle. In terms of internet service and broadband, I said earlier, I think it's a utility at this point, and we need to ensure that people have access to it. I'm a historian, and so I'm always looking for comparisons to the past. 100 years ago, 80 years ago, electricity was seen as a luxury that you had to be able to afford. And I think at this point, we need to treat it like they treated electricity in the 30s and 40s. It is how you can live a complete and successful life. You need access to it. So I know that it's really varied across District 5, right? In Moscow, it's not hard at all to get access to internet, even if it does cost an arm and a leg. The farther you get out from there, the more difficult it is. And I can tell you, I know my mother-in-law lives outside of Deary, not even in Deary, and it's been difficult for her for years. And so she's really invested in seeing it, and I would like to see us treat it more as a utility.
Thank you, Dulce. Great answers from all of our candidates. We are going to take a 2-minute technology break, so don't wander off, candidates, but 2 minutes, okay? All right. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you. This next question, we're going to start with Brandon, and it has to do with Idaho's foster care system. Since you mentioned that in some of your earlier comments, this was a question that came in on Facebook. Question is, this viewer would love to learn more about your feelings or how to improve Idaho's foster care system, your experience with it, and what other candidates feel. So again, I'll start with you, Brandon, and if anyone else wants to answer this, just raise your hand and we'll get the camera to you. But Brandon, why don't you start?
Okay, so my wife and I got into foster parenting, and we actually became a therapeutic home where we had kids that had really been damaged by their parents in the past. And I tell this story because it's one that kind of woke me up to how bad the foster care system is. And these children came into our home, and it was a brother and sister, and the brother just laid on the ground, kind of in the fetal position. And the caseworker said, just make sure he's fed, make sure his diaper's changed. He was like 3 years old, and that's what he's going to do. And a week later, she called me up and she said, how the kid's doing? I said, well, Hunter's outside playing with Curtis. And she dropped everything, came over to the house, and sat on our couch and cried because this kid was outside playing with someone else that she'd never seen. And all it took was the love that that kid needed. Well, what happened is we got going through and the parental rights were cut, and we said we want to adopt. And she said, well, they're not adoptable. And I'm saying, okay, what does that mean exactly? And she says, well, nobody wants to adopt them. And I asked the question, are we sitting in the same room because we want to adopt them? Well, they finally agreed to let us take them up to, we moved from Springfield, Oregon at the time, up into Gresham, Oregon, and they let us take them. And then a couple weeks later, they came up and they pulled them back out for no reason whatsoever. I tell this story because I think there's too many barriers for parents that really want to take care of kids, that really want to help these children out. My sister-in-law has always struggled trying to get someone trying to adopt a child, and there's always these barriers that keep on stepping in and stopping it. So I think that one of the things we can look at is what kind of barriers there really is, and think of the children first, because that's the most important part, is what's the child going to have? What kind of a home is he going to be able to go into? And then start looking at those barriers and start cutting some of those barriers out that are just red tape.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else? Carolyn?
I'd love to.
Okay.
So one of the things that we do when I was on Health and Welfare Committee, and I believe the Senator is now, that we used to have a joint meeting between the House and the Senate and hear issues that are facing the health and welfare universe, which is a big universe. And I'll tell you what, the saddest stories were the foster care stories that we heard, just heartbreaking stories. We've had an interim committee going for the last 4 years. They've really made some improvements to the system. One of the problems is we didn't have enough or we didn't have enough social workers, and so we've really tried to increase the number of social workers. These folks are rock stars, but they're just stretched way too thin. We've spent a lot of money upgrading their system because they have to keep really good records. So we've invested in tablets for them to take on their meetings with them. And made it a much easier. I'm hoping, I've been door knocking and I've been hearing that from the social workers I've ran into, that the system is improving. But we have the same issue with adoption in Idaho, and I've heard a lot of those stories, foster parents who wanted to adopt where the children were removed from them without any good reason, and that appears to be an issue across the United States, and I'm not sure why, but this interim committee on foster children is looking at those kind of issues, because obviously when the state has responsibility for those children, that's one of the most precious responsibilities that we have. We've made investments in education for them. We've made investments in scholarships so they can go on to college. I think the other thing that we need to do is do a better job when they age out, so that they have some support system when they age out of the system. We've got a long way to go, but I think we've clearly made some big steps in the last 4 years.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Paul. One of the first things I remember from when I was running for the first time 2 years ago was going to a fundraiser in St. Mary's and I met this lady, and she said she was the foster care parent in St. Mary's, and I thought, I must have misheard. She must be one of them, but no, she was the only foster care parent in St. Mary's. So it does seem clear that we still have some hurdles to overcome on this. I think I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about how I think we should be doing the things in the state to try to keep kids, to try to make their original families successful. There's many behavioral health issues that lead to a kid being in foster care, substance abuse, maybe there's a mental health issue. Maybe they didn't have access to good education. And I always believe in investing in the infrastructure in the front end to kind of try to avoid these problems later on. We can certainly do better in the foster care system, but I'd like to make sure we're investing enough in behavioral health to stem it so we have less of the problems.
Thank you, David. Renee?
Yeah, so right now, we have 1,800 children in the foster care system in our area, and a quarter of them are waiting for a family. And I even want to bring in the discussion of homeless kids in the state. And so there's about a third of our homeless population are minors, and they experience homelessness at one point or another during the school year. And this is coming from families that are having a hard time making ends meet. It's coming from families that disagree with the child, and in fact, they're leaving. So how can they actually concentrate in school? And I think that, kids, they cannot choose the lives that they were born to. And we need to make sure that if they're not supported at home, and if they're looking for a home, we need to make sure that we support them within our education system. It's going to be really important to make sure that they have the emotional care, the socio and emotional care in school that they need to succeed. I've been door knocking thousands of doors, and I think it's very important to know that especially a person that I was talking to, he has several adopted children in his family, and he had to take them out of a school because they weren't getting the emotional care that they needed, and they couldn't fit in. And these kids actually have backgrounds that they may need more attention at school, and so we need to make sure that that is something that our school system actually provides.
Renee, and just quick question. You mentioned the number was 1,700?
1,800, yeah.
1,800, is that statewide?
It's in the area, and so right now Idaho is part of a larger consortium
okay.
Of foster care families.
Okay, thank you. Dulce?
So one of the most rewarding parts about running for office has been speaking with people about their biggest concerns, what's weighing heavy on their minds. And this conversation reminds me of a door that I knocked on actually just a couple days ago. A gentleman said, the biggest challenge that my family is facing right now is that I have 2 significantly developmentally disabled children, and I do not get the same benefits from the state to care for them that a caregiver coming into our home would be paid, or if these children were placed into a different home. So I think that we need to ensure that there are not barriers for children remaining in their homes, both as children, 0 to 18, but also as young adults. Many young adults need to stay living with their families. And this individual shared with me that his son just recently turned 18, and because they were not a certified home, they hadn't passed all of the regulations that a larger home would have if they had many people living there. Again, they didn't get the same support from the state. And I think, caring for a developmentally disabled child probably precludes a lot of people from full-time work, and so there needs to be some sort of financial support. And so I think this is another place where we can look to fill the gap.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and to clarify, Idaho is probably the only state in the nation that has certified family homes that are provided by the parents. So that is a step that Idaho has had in place for over a decade to enable those children to stay in that home and receive funding. Unfortunately, and I've heard from a lot of those people, and they're wonderful folks, they have not seen any increases in many, many years now, and the costs are getting more expensive. But it is a really unique way that Idaho has dealt with that.
Thank you, Carolyn, for further educating me on a topic I knew nothing about 2 days ago.
Thank you. And just for the record, I have 4 beautiful granddaughters that went through the foster and adoption system here. I'm a little biased too. Okay, we have time for one more question, and we wanted to make sure it was a zinger before closing statements. And this came mostly from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, their blog. So I will read this to you. This has to do with property tax relief. It's for all candidates, and we will start with Dulce on this. This past legislative session, Idaho lawmakers proposed several measures to freeze property tax budget growth and provide relief to a good majority of homeowners, renters, and businesses. For instance, Representative Tammy Nichols from Middleton told House members that Idahoans are desperate for tax relief, and that one bill, House Bill 409, Representative Moyle's measure, while not a permanent fix, would give people a break from ever-rising property tax increases. And I quote, "We represent the taxpayers," Nichols asserted. "We don't represent the cities or the counties. We represent the taxpayers, and the taxpayers need relief." In June, Governor Brad Little earmarked roughly $200 million of the federal CARES Act funds to go toward property tax relief for Idahoans. And the blog continues, at a time when the people of Idaho are reeling economically from state-mandated shutdowns, one would think it would be a no-brainer to simply accept already allocated federal funds to help mitigate the effects of those shutdowns. Unfortunately, it has been anything but a no-brainer for many cities and counties, including Moscow and Latah County. As a legislator, explain how you might address property tax relief in the upcoming session. And I'll start with you, Dulce.
Well, I agree. Property taxes are oppressive. I bought a home 2 years ago and definitely had sticker shock the first property bill that came, property tax bill. So I share in that concern. I heard a lot about it going into the 2020 legislative session and was severely disappointed, just as the folks at the Freedom Foundation were, that there was no meaningful progress made on that in 3 months' time. I think there are some very clear-cut ways to bring about some property tax relief for folks, and I don't think it involves freezing county or city budgets, because I kind of take issue that would actually lower your property tax bill, because so much of it is dependent on the value of your property. So I would say we need to allow the homeowner's exemption to be indexed again, capping it at $100,000. Really disadvantages anybody with a home over $200,000, and for a lot of people, especially in Moscow, you're losing out on that deal. I also think we need to allow the circuit breaker to increase. It hasn't increased in over a decade, and I think we could expand those who have access to the circuit breaker program, which provides meaningful property tax relief for those who can least afford it. In terms of the CARES Act funding, I would just say that Latah County has one of the best prosecuting attorneys' offices in the state. And so if their legal advice was to not take those funds because they believed it would ultimately not be lawful, then I trust those very smart individuals, and I'm glad that Latah County's government did not put its citizens in the position where they would have to repay money later down the road.
Thank you, Dulce. Renee?
I'm really glad that you brought this up. I think we have a property tax crisis in the state. In fact, we have a tax crisis in the state. And nobody likes property taxes, and they have gone up in the last few years. And part of that is because assessed values of homes have gone up in the last few years. And usually people would think that's a good thing if their home is worth more, but their property taxes have also gone up. And it's hard. I've been talking to people at the door again, and especially elderly people who are on fixed incomes. They are having a hard time keeping up with those rising property taxes. They have to choose between medications and their actual keeping their homes. And so that is really concerning to me. And I think that there's other solutions for helping our property taxes, and I already mentioned our education system and also funding our education system. So we give a lot of sales tax exemptions to businesses in the state. Last year, in fact, we gave over $2.5 billion in sales tax exemptions. Over the past 15 years, it's been $28 billion. And I'm not saying that businesses shouldn't be encouraged in the state. I own a small business, but what I am saying is that we need to review these exemptions and have them sunset so we make sure that they are needed. And alone, just a percentage of taking back some of those sales tax exemptions could relieve your property taxes. The other thing that we're doing in the state is we're collecting internet sales tax. We started last year, and the internet sales tax does not go through the revenue sharing formula. And so this is going to be really important. It's just going into its own pool of money that it's not being used right now. And so as brick and mortar sales are going down, internet sales are going up, and we absolutely need to make sure that we're using the internet sales tax money that we're collecting from taxpayers to relieve some of the other taxes, such as property taxes, that they endure in our area.
Renee, do you know if the local units of government get a share of that internet sales tax?
So nobody does right now. It's just going into a special fund that's not being used. And in fact, it's slated to finally be used, or at least discussed, by 2024. But right now it's just sitting there.
Just sitting there. Thank you. David.
Thank you. Well, Dulce and Renee have really been thorough on this. I'll add a couple things around the edges. I think it's important to fix the homeowner's exemption. You know, when we originally passed that 20 or 30 years ago, it intended to shield about half the property value for the average home from property tax. And I don't know of anybody in Moscow who has a house under $200,000, so that shield has faded. And it's been especially a problem as residential properties have risen in value at a much faster rate than commercial or other forms of property. And that has really resulted in a lot of shift of tax onto the residential taxpayer. So I think fixing the homeowner's exemption is an important thing by re-indexing and bringing that base up to the missing index years. I think the other major thing is I think we need to do a better, more thorough job of funding education at the state level. If you look at your property tax bill in many cities, Moscow one, the levy for the school is the single biggest piece, right? And that's because the state is not providing enough funds for that. And it has lots of consequences. It drives up property taxes, which are not a very fair form of tax. It crowds out other things that we might use property taxes for, and especially it crowds out bonds. Bonds, which take a 2/3 vote to pass, are just, you know, if we're already paying this huge levy year in, year out, how do we get our citizens to pass a bond? So I think we need to pull that back to the state level and find sales tax money. The internet sales tax would be a great first start on that. Perhaps some income tax money to help fund that piece.
Thank you, David. Carolyn.
Thanks. A great final question. I serve on the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee, and it's a very interesting position. And we are able to select a couple studies a year to do a deep dive into. And one of the things that we selected was a study that I had submitted looking at the unfunded mandates that our legislation is giving to city and counties. So there's a lot of expectations of local government. We want them to fix their own roads. We want them to provide jails. We want them to provide public defenders. The list is very long. And when we do legislation, we're supposed to put a statement of purpose and a fiscal impact. And in my research for hemp legislation, my great adventure in the legislation, I have found some great fiscal impact statements that other states have, and I've submitted those to our JFAC team and to leadership in the House and the Senate. We need to do real fiscal impact statements, and they need to talk about what that impact is to that local unit of government. Because the last time I checked, I'm a taxpayer. And my tax bill doesn't matter to me if it's going to the feds, if it's going to the state, if it's going to property taxes. That's taxes. It's coming out of my wallet. And we need to really make sure that what we are expecting, we understand where all those dollars are going. There's a county in Idaho with 800 residents. And they have the same expectations for their jails, for their public defenders, for their roads, that a town or a county like Ada County has. How can you do that with 800 residents? So we really need to look at how we do legislation and what the true impact is, not just what we guess it is. I think that's a really important thing to do.
Thank you, Carolyn. And Brandon.
Well, Carolyn, I think that was well put. I look at taxes. I'm not a big fan. Our housing taxes our property taxes have jumped dramatically over the last couple of years. We've lived here since 2013, and we've just watched it continually go up. One thing that I've heard here tonight, and I've actually seen it in an email that was sent out, is getting more money to come from the state to cover some of those property taxes. My biggest concern with that is that the state's going to have to figure out how to raise taxes in other places for everyone else, and then we're controlled by the state and their money that they're sending. So I have a concern with that. I think that the more local you keep your taxes, the more people are involved with it, the more people have the say in what's going on with it. As far as bringing the taxes down, it's got to start with spending control. You've got to control the spending before you can bring taxes down, because you still have to have that revenue come in. Our city government, our federal government, our state government, they all have specific things we want them to do, and so they have to have some revenue coming in for that, and that's where the taxes actually come from. But we've got to be able to control the spending. So my goal is to start there and figure out, okay, we need to prioritize and figure out how do we control some of the spending that might be out of control.
Thank you. And we're going to do closing statements. Those will be 90 seconds each. But before that, I just wanted to share some of the other great questions that came in, just so you're mindful of, and maybe out on the campaign trail you'll get questioned. There was a follow-up question on sales tax, as well as sales tax exemptions, and this question had to do with maybe looking at an overall review of all sales tax exemptions. There was a question about collaboration and ability to work across the aisle. So, great question. Question about interstate air service, and I know Representative Troy serves on that interim study committee, as well as Senator Nelson is on transportation. A really important issue for us here on the Palouse, trying to get connectivity back to Boise. And then there was a question on the Palouse Basin water adjudication and water supply matters, and a recent filing by the Nez Perce tribe regarding some claims that might impact some of those supply alternatives. So great questions from our audience and members of the chamber. So with that, why don't we start with closing statements, and Brandon, I will start with you. 90 seconds.
All right, so first off, I appreciate this forum and the opportunity that we have to get our message out. It's been a great opportunity for me to get out and actually meet people, and that's been one of the best things that I've enjoyed about this, and getting other people's perspectives and find out what's really hot to them. One of the things that I've learned is that this isn't about what I believe or what I want to bring. It's more about what's best for our community, what's best for District 5. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm learning, is being able to listen to other people and take their perspectives into account. I personally kind of pride myself in my business with being able to build unity with my team, and being able to pull the team together to actually get something done. I believe that going to Boise, that's one of the things that I want to really work on, is being able to build unity and work with people from both sides of the aisle, because I don't think that the divide is going to help anything out. So that's what my hope is in going there, and I would just reach out. If you have any questions about me, feel free to look me up. I'm online, and send me an email. I'd be happy to answer it. And I hope you give me a thought for a vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Carolyn.
Thank you. You know, when I first ran, I was talking to a group of government students in Genesee, and one of the questions was, how do you get along with those people in Southern Idaho, with those people? And I said, you know, my issues aren't so much with North and South. My issues are with urban and rural, and they just can't imagine some of the struggles that we have. So for several years, I've kind of talked to leadership on both the House and the Senate about starting a rural caucus. And I was discouraged from calling it a rural caucus, so we called it the Farm, Ranch, and Timber Caucus. I don't know, as close to rural, I think, as you can get. And I sought out Republicans and Democrats from the House and the Senate to join me in this. So I had a Senate member from the Republican Party, a Senate member from the Democratic Party, the same in the House. We meet weekly. We talk about issues that are important to rural Idaho. The reality is, in Boise, probably 95% of the things that we talk about are not partisan. They're managing the state of Idaho for the betterment of Idaho and the citizens who live here. So we really need to work together. I think that's important. I think you can look at my record and who I've invited to be co-sponsors on my bill, and see that that's something that I'm very committed to, and I will continue to be so. And I hope I get your vote on November 3rd or before.
Thank you, Carolyn. David.
Thank you very much to the Chamber for having us here tonight. And I want to thank especially my fellow candidates here who are here. It's really a service that all of us are willing to do, and I think we all have the best wishes of the citizens at heart. We may disagree on policy and how we go forward, but I appreciate your service. And I wish my opponent, Mr. Foreman, was able to be here tonight too. There are fairly sharp contrasts that you can see between the two of us, and I would have liked the citizens to see that. I have learned a lot in 2 years in the legislature. I've learned how to work across the aisle, especially on transportation issues. Working with Senator Brackett and Senator Crabtree, we did quite a few different things in transportation, including that bill to help fund rural bridges. I would like to continue to be in Boise to help you serve, just to serve you. I just started some work on the Behavioral Health Council, which is a joint effort with the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch to provide a new strategic plan on how we do behavioral health, and I would like to continue with that work. And I'll end with that, and I would appreciate your vote this year, and go out and request your absentee if you haven't already.
Thank you, David. Renee?
We need to make sure that Idahoans have their basic needs met. If it's true that you could judge a state by how it treats its most vulnerable citizens, then our current legislature is failing the people of Idaho. Our education system is ranked dead last in the nation. We have low high school graduation rates. Our go-on rate is not very high. And we're not providing enough career technical education opportunities, especially at the high school level. Our current legislature has chosen to give business sales tax exemptions instead of funding our education system, and we could do better. We also don't have a living wage in the state, and in fact, if we were to keep up with the minimum wage when it was enacted in 1938, we would be making $12 an hour right now just to keep up with inflation. And many people are having a hard time making ends meet. And in fact, last legislative session, the representatives in the State House had chosen to allow local communities to not increase their local minimum wage, tying our hands behind our back, and so we can't improve conditions locally. We also have a property tax crisis in the state. There are 6 bills proposed last legislative session to help solve our taxes in the state, and most of them weren't even heard in committee. And then lastly, our healthcare system is not adequate. We need to make sure that Idahoans can pay their bills and also receive the healthcare that they need. So we need to start fixing these problems in the legislature and stop wasting taxpayer money on needless issues and start addressing the true issues. Please look me up, ReneeLoveForIdaho.com, and see how else I can represent you in the district.
Thank you, Renee. And Dulce?
Well, I will end the way I began by saying thank you. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and SEL. Thank you to Melissa at Amplify. And thank you to everyone who's here in the room with me, as well as everyone who's watching from home. I really do believe that educated voters are the key to a functioning democracy in America, and it's essential. So I hope everybody who's watching at home will then share information with their friends and loved ones who weren't able to join in this evening. Ed Schweitzer opened this evening, Dr. Schweitzer opened by saying, "We the people are eager for civility." I am hearing that time and time again at the doors. People are tired of division. And so I am committed to being a responsive and a dynamic representative for you in Boise. I'm not interested in a party agenda. I'm interested in representing the views of the folks here in District 5. That's why I'm spending time meeting with people at their doors. I have experience working with people from a variety of backgrounds and with a variety of beliefs, and I like to think that one of my strengths is finding consensus and building a middle ground. I'm very pragmatic, and so I would really like to take that skill set to the legislature to find some common ground and get to work for folks in District 5. We don't need to be spending time on partisan, highly wedged issues. We're really all in this together, and that's what drives me, is knowing that we're all in this together. So please find me at DulceForIdaho.com. I'm the only Dulce running in the state of Idaho right now, so it's easy to find me. And I hope that, again, you will go out and vote on November 3rd. I hope I can earn your vote, and thanks again for watching this evening.
Dulce, thank you, and to all of our candidates, thank you. Great responses tonight, just some great dialogue. So with that, Jenny Ford, back to the podium.
Okay. I know we went a little bit over. Thank you so much for our viewers as well as the candidates that came tonight. The Moscow Chamber of Commerce truly appreciates the women and men of service that are willing to serve our state. Again, we just want to say thank you to SEL for hosting us tonight, specifically Dr. Schweitzer as well as Haley Lewis and Beth Lewis who assisted with organizing this, and Jeff with IT. Also Mackenzie Lawrence for volunteering tonight. Paul Kimmell is moderator. Thank you so much again. And Melissa with Amplify, thank you for the technology support. And on behalf of Moscow Chamber of Commerce, thanks for tuning in.